Let us begin by being very still for a moment, not outwardly, but inwardly. Let us not rush into ideas or conclusions or opinions about what is happening in the world today. For if we begin there, we will already have left the kingdom. We are not here to analyze the times, nor to predict events, nor to name movements. We are here to listen. We are here to behold. We are here to witness God in action. There is a great deal being said today about a so-called awakening, about a global shift, about humanity entering a new era of consciousness. And yet, if we are not careful, we will mistake noise for revelation, excitement for illumination, and movement for truth. The truth of being has never come in waves. God does not arrive in seasons. Spirit does not awaken. Spirit is. Before Abraham was, I am. Not will be, not is becoming, but I am. Nothing new is happening to God. Nothing has ever happened to God. I am the Lord. I change not. What appears to be happening in the world is not an awakening of truth, but a disturbance in the human sense of things. The old concepts are failing. The old securities are dissolving. The old explanations no longer satisfy. And so the human mind, feeling the ground give way beneath it, calls this awakening. But it is not truth awakening. It is illusion being uncovered. Truth does not need to awaken. Truth does not slumber. Truth does not progress. Truth does not improve. Truth simply is and has always been. The kingdom of God is within you, not approaching you, not descending upon you. Within you, always has been, always will be. And so when we speak of waking up, we must understand that what is waking is not spirit, but the human sense of separation from spirit. There have been times like this before, always, when the world's structures become too rigid, too externalized, too dependent on form. The pressure of truth begins to crack them. And when that happens, there is confusion, there is fear, there is unrest. Not because truth is absent, but because it is pressing through the cracks of false belief. Light does not disturb what is real. It disturbs only what is unreal. You will notice that when people speak of awakening today, they are often restless. They are often anxious. They are often driven to consume teaching after teaching, video after video, method after method. They say they are awakening, yet they are not at peace. And that alone tells us that something is misunderstood. For the Christ does not announce itself with agitation. The Christ is known by its peace. My peace I give unto you, the Master said, not as the world giveth, not the peace of explanation, not the peace of certainty, not the peace of control, but the peace that comes from resting in that which does not change. If what we are calling awakening does not bring us nearer to stillness, then it is not awakening at all. It is merely the mind rearranging its furniture. We must be very careful not to turn truth into a movement. Movements come and go. They rise and fall. They excite and then disappoint. Truth does not move. Truth stands still. Be still and know that I am God. Not think, not study, not discuss, but be still. Stillness is not a technique. It is a recognition that there is nothing to add to God and nothing to remove from God. This work, therefore, is not about becoming more spiritual. It is not about elevating consciousness. It is not about entering a new age. It is about the quiet, gentle, often uncomfortable realization that something we relied upon was never real. It is about the discovery that we have been living by appearances and calling them power. And when those appearances begin to fail us, we say, something is happening. Yes, something is being undone. The prophet did not say, behold, I make all things new. He said, behold, I make all things new, that is, newly perceived, not newly created. The creation was finished before the foundation of the world. What changes is not creation, but perception. What changes is not reality, but our relationship to reality. So let us not be impressed by numbers, or trends, or popularity, or language. Let us not be swept up by the excitement of feeling part of something large. Truth is never large in the human sense. Truth is narrow, straight is the gate, and narrow is the way. Narrow because it admits no opinions, no judgments, no fears, no hopes, only being. If something is stirring within you, it is not because the world is awakening, it is because you are being called to let go of something you once trusted. And that calling does not come with fanfare. It comes as a quiet discomfort with appearances. It comes as a loss of appetite for noise. It comes as a desire to withdraw, not from life, but from interpretation. This is not the beginning of something. It is the end of something. The end of reliance on form, the end of confidence in the mind, the end of believing that truth can be grasped, shared, explained, or promoted. Except ye become as a little child, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. A child does not analyze reality. A child rests in it. So we begin here not with excitement, not with prophecy, not with prediction, but with stillness. And in that stillness, we do not ask what is happening to the world. We ask only this: what am I willing to release? For awakening is not the acquisition of something new. It is the surrender of something false. There is a phrase being used very freely in our day, a global awakening. It sounds impressive. It gives one the feeling of being present at a great turning point in history. And yet, if we examine it carefully in the light of spirit, we shall see that it is not only inaccurate, but potentially misleading. For awakening is never global. Awakening is always individual. Truth is never mass conscious. Truth is always revealed in the secrecy of individual consciousness. Jesus never addressed crowds for the purpose of awakening them. He spoke to multitudes, yes, but the revelation came only to those who had ears to hear. Many are called, but few are chosen. Not chosen by God, but chosen by their receptivity. Truth is not democratic. It does not spread by numbers. It does not move by momentum. It reveals itself where the ground has been prepared. If there were such a thing as a global awakening, we would not see the fear, the polarization, the anger, the frantic search for certainty that characterize the world today. What we are witnessing is not awakening, but exposure. The human sense of life is being exposed as inadequate. The systems we trusted, economic, political, religious, even psychological, are proving unable to give peace. And so the world calls this collapse an awakening because it does not yet know what else to call it. But let us be clear. Confusion is not awakening. Noise is not illumination. The breaking down of belief is not the establishing of truth. When the ground shakes, one may feel something is happening, but shaking is not the same as standing on the rock. other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Christ. And Christ is not a movement. Christ is not a collective event. Christ is the divine selfhood revealed within. There have been many times in history when the world believed it was on the brink of enlightenment. And yet each time the same error was made. Truth was expected to appear outwardly. It was expected to reorganize society, reform institutions, or transform humanity en masse. But the Master was very clear. My kingdom is not of this world. It does not appear as a system. It does not come with observation. It does not announce itself with signs and wonders. What is happening today is that the human mind is exhausting itself. It has tried control, knowledge, information, power, and self-improvement. It has tried religion and rejected it. It has tried science and found it incomplete. It has tried psychology and found it insufficient. And now, in its fatigue, it reaches for the word awakening. But the fatigue of the mind is not the awakening of the soul. Awakening does not happen because enough people talk about it. It does not happen because a certain year arrives. It does not happen because consciousness raises its vibration. Awakening happens the moment an individual becomes willing to stop interpreting life and begins to behold it. It happens when one no longer seeks to fix appearances, but is willing to see through them. We must remember that truth has always been present in every age. The Christ was not born 2,000 years ago. The Christ was revealed 2,000 years ago, and it is revealed now in exactly the same way, not through crowds, not through platforms, not through media, but through inner surrender. Flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. If we say that humanity is awakening, we place power in time. If we say that the world is changing, we place authority in events. But spirit does not unfold in history. Spirit reveals itself in consciousness. The only real awakening that ever takes place is the moment an individual withdraws belief from appearances and rests, even briefly, in the awareness of God as all. That is why we see such contradiction today. People speak of unity while living in division. They speak of love while reacting in fear. They speak of consciousness while living in constant mental agitation. This is not hypocrisy. It is confusion. It is the confusion that comes when old beliefs are no longer convincing, but new understanding has not yet dawned. The danger here is subtle. One may begin to believe that because many are questioning reality, many are therefore realizing truth. But questioning is not realization. Doubt is not faith. Deconstruction is not revelation. Tearing down concepts is only preparation. It is not the building of the house. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. So we are not witnessing a global awakening. We are witnessing a global unsettling, and that unsettling will either lead to deeper illusion or to genuine spiritual realization, depending entirely on the individual's willingness to turn inward rather than outward. Truth never spreads horizontally. It descends vertically into the depths of one's own being. And when it does not make headlines. It does not seek followers. It does not need validation. It simply stands revealed as that which has always been. Therefore, do not measure your spiritual life by what seems to be happening in the world. Do not be encouraged or discouraged by movements, numbers, or language. The only awakening that matters is this: am I less impressed by appearances than I was before? Am I more willing to rest in God and less eager to explain life? When that begins to happen quietly, without announcement, then awakening has begun, not in the world, but in you. There is a principle that must be understood if we are not to be disturbed by what we are witnessing within ourselves and in the world. Confusion always precedes clarity. It cannot be otherwise. When light enters consciousness, it does not immediately produce harmony in human experience. It first exposes what has been hidden, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. When truth begins to dawn in an individual's awareness, it does not arrive as instant peace. It arrives as discomfort. It arrives as the unsettling recognition that much of what we relied upon was never real. The mind, having lived by appearances, resists this exposure. It cries out. It seeks explanation. It looks for new structures to replace the old ones. And this inner resistance is experienced as confusion. We must not mistake this confusion for failure, nor should we interpret it as regression. Confusion is not the absence of truth. It is the collision of truth with illusion. The human sense of life cannot coexist peacefully with spiritual reality. One must give way. And before it does, it protests. The scriptures tell us that when the children of Israel were led out of Egypt, they did not enter the promised land at once. They wandered in the wilderness. And that wilderness was not a punishment. It was a necessary interval between dependence on bondage and readiness for freedom. Egypt had to be unlearned before Canaan could be lived in. So it is with us. When old beliefs about God, health, supply, identity, and power begin to dissolve, there is a period in which nothing seems stable. The mind says, if this is not true, then what is? And in that question lies the temptation to rush ahead, to grasp new concepts, new teachings, new explanations. But clarity does not come from replacement. It comes from cessation. The Master did not say, learn a new doctrine. He said, except ye become as a little child. A child does not substitute one theory for another. A child rests in not knowing. And it is precisely this resting that the adult mind resists. The mind wants certainty. Spirit requires receptivity. You will notice that in times of confusion, people become more talkative about truth, not less. They explain more, they teach more, they declare more. This is not realization. It is insecurity. The realized consciousness becomes quieter, not louder. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength, not in assertion, not in defense, not in persuasion. Confusion arises because the mind has not yet learned how to be still. It has lost its old anchors, but it has not yet discovered the rock. And so it flails about, gathering ideas, forming opinions, and calling this process awakening. But true clarity does not come from mental activity. It comes from mental surrender. There is a passage in Isaiah that says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. As long as we try to reach God through thought, we will remain confused. As long as we seek clarity through reasoning, we will wander. Clarity is revealed, not achieved. It descends into consciousness when we stop trying to manage the process. This is why many sincere students feel as though they are losing their footing. They say, I no longer believe what I once believed, but I do not yet know what to believe. And the answer is, you are not meant to believe anything. Belief belongs to the mind. Truth belongs to spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Poor in spirit does not mean weak. It means emptied of opinions. We must also understand that confusion is intensified when we try to carry spiritual light into areas of life where we still want personal control. The light reveals inconsistencies. It shows us where we say God is all and yet live as though appearances have power. This exposure can be uncomfortable, but it is merciful. It prevents us from settling for half-truths. Do not try to resolve confusion by action. Do not try to solve it by explanation. And above all, do not try to escape it by distraction. Confusion is a doorway, not a destination. If we remain quiet, receptive, and patient, it will give way to a deeper clarity than the mind has ever known. The psalmist said, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Notice that he did not say he would build a house in the valley, nor that he would analyze the valley. He walked through it, and he did so without fear, because he understood that the shadow has no substance. Confusion is a shadow. It has no power. It only appears where light is present. And if we do not turn back, if we do not rush ahead, if we simply abide, we will find that clarity emerges not as an answer, but as a peace that passes understanding. This peace does not explain life. It does not predict outcomes. It does not organize events. It simply rests in the awareness of God as all, and in that resting, confusion dissolves of its own accord, just as darkness yields to light without effort. One of the greatest dangers confronting sincere seekers today is the tendency to mistake mental stimulation for spiritual revelation. The mind enjoys activity. It thrives on new ideas, new terminology, new frameworks. And when these ideas speak of consciousness, energy, awakening, or truth, the mind eagerly claims them as spiritual progress. Yet stimulation is not revelation, and activity is not awareness. Revelation never excites the mind. Revelation quiets it. When God reveals itself, the intellect does not leap forward, it bows. The scriptures tell us that Elijah did not find God in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire, but in the still, small voice. That voice does not stimulate thought, it silences it. And wherever thought is silenced, truth is present. Today, however, there is a great appetite for stimulation. Many move from teaching to teaching, from voice to voice, from platform to platform, not because they are being led inward, but because the mind is restless. And restlessness is not a sign of awakening. It is a sign that the soul has not yet been given authority. Be still and know that I am God. Stillness is not optional. It is the gateway. The human mind loves explanation. It loves to know why, how, and when. It is comforted by understanding. But God is not understood. God is revealed, and the moment we try to grasp revelation with the intellect, we lose it. The things of God are foolishness unto man. That is not an insult to the mind, it is a limitation of its function. Many today believe they are advancing spiritually because they can articulate complex ideas about consciousness. They speak fluently about vibration, energy, timelines, dimensions, and awareness. And yet, when faced with illness, fear, lack, or conflict, they react as though appearances have power. This tells us something important. Knowledge has not become realization. Revelation changes our relationship to appearances. Stimulation only changes our language about them. A stimulated mind may talk beautifully about truth while still fearing the future. A revealed consciousness rests quietly in God, even when the future is unknown. Take, therefore, no thought for the morrow, not because the morrow is guaranteed, but because God is present now. We must be honest with ourselves. Are we listening in order to hear God, or are we listening in order to feel interested? Are we reading to be transformed or to be reassured? Are we seeking truth, or are we seeking relief from boredom, fear, or uncertainty? These questions are not condemnations, they are invitations to sincerity. There is a subtle form of addiction that wears spiritual clothing. It is the addiction to insight without surrender, to illumination without obedience, to knowledge without stillness. This addiction keeps one forever stimulated and never satisfied. The soul remains hungry because it is not being fed. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. That word does not proceed through constant input, it proceeds through silence. Revelation does not multiply ideas, it simplifies life, it removes complexity, it dissolves urgency. It does not make us feel more powerful, it makes us feel more dependent not on people, teachings, or techniques, but on God. I can of mine own self do nothing. That is not weakness. That is the beginning of spiritual strength. If, after listening or reading, you feel compelled to explain truth to others, you may be stimulated. If, however, you feel compelled to be quieter, more restrained, more watchful of your own judgments, then revelation may be at work. Revelation does not rush outward. It settles inward. It makes fewer statements and asks fewer questions. It rests. We must learn to recognize the difference between excitement and peace. Excitement rises and falls. Peace abides. Excitement seeks more. Peace is content with less. Excitement needs affirmation. Peace needs no witness. My grace is sufficient for thee. Sufficient, not abundant, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but sufficient. Therefore, let us not measure our spiritual life by how much we consume, how much we know, or how much we can say. Let us measure it by how easily we return to stillness, how quickly we withdraw judgment, how naturally we rest in God when appearances present themselves. When revelation comes, it will not announce itself. It will not impress the mind. It will simply stand revealed as an inner conviction so quiet, so gentle, so natural, that we may be tempted to overlook it. But it is there that the Christ is known not in stimulation, but in stillness. It is not uncommon today to meet sincere seekers who say, I feel as though I am awakening, and yet I am more disoriented than ever. They speak of losing interest in the world as they once knew it, of feeling detached from familiar goals, relationships, or ambitions, and yet they do not feel anchored in anything new. This condition, though often troubling, is not unusual and it is not necessarily wrong, but it is frequently misunderstood. The instability that accompanies what people call awakening does not come from truth itself. Truth never destabilizes. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. Instability arises when the mind loosens its grip on old beliefs without yet surrendering to spirit. The individual stands between two worlds, no longer satisfied with appearances, but not yet resting in reality. When human concepts begin to dissolve, concepts of self, of power, of security, the mind feels threatened. It has lived by these concepts. It has organized life around them. And when they begin to fail, the mind experiences this as loss. It says, if this is not real, then what am I standing on? And until the soul is allowed to take its rightful place, there is a sense of groundlessness. This is why many who speak of awakening also speak of anxiety, exhaustion, or emotional volatility. They have removed the old anchors, but they have not yet discovered the rock. They have questioned form, but they have not yet learned to rest in the formless. And so they drift sometimes upward in inspiration, sometimes downward in fear. The Master warned of this when he said that a house swept clean but left empty invites trouble. If the old beliefs are removed and nothing takes their place, the mind will rush to fill the vacuum with imagination, speculation, fear, or false spirituality. This is why awakening without spiritual discipline can lead to imbalance. Let us be clear. Truth does not remove stability. It transfers it. It transfers stability from the world of appearances to the consciousness of God. But if one removes confidence in appearances without establishing confidence in God, there will be a period of instability. That is not punishment. It is instruction. Many are taught today to let go without being taught what to let go into. They are told to release identity, beliefs, and attachments. But they are not shown how to abide in God as their life. And so they feel as though they are dissolving without direction. True surrender is never empty. It is filled with presence. Joel's teaching has always emphasized this. Withdrawal from appearances must be accompanied by resting in God. You do not merely deny the power of form, you affirm quietly and inwardly the allness of spirit. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That is not poetry. That is stability. Disorientation occurs when awakening is approached as a mental process rather than a spiritual one. The mind tries to awaken itself. It analyzes consciousness. It watches itself thinking. It questions reality endlessly. And all the while, it remains the one in charge. But the mind cannot awaken itself any more than the eye can see itself without a mirror. Awakening begins the moment the mind relinquishes authority. Lean not unto thine own understanding. As long as we rely on understanding, we will remain unstable. Understanding fluctuates. Revelation abides. Revelation does not come through effort. It comes through humility. We must also understand that awakening does not remove us from the human experience. It does not lift us above daily life. It does not excuse us from responsibility. What it does is change the basis upon which we live. Instead of living from reaction, we begin to live from awareness. Instead of being governed by circumstances, we are governed by inner listening. When this shift begins to take place, there may be a period of readjustment. Old habits fall away. Old motivations weaken. Old fears surface to be seen and released. This can feel like instability, but it is actually reorientation. The soul is learning to lead where the mind once ruled. The psalmist said, "My soul, wait thou only upon God, for my expectation is from him." That waiting is not passive. It is not resignation. It is active trust. It is the willingness to stand still without rushing to conclusions, without grasping for explanations, without trying to define oneself anew. If you find yourself feeling unsettled, do not try to fix it. Do not analyze it. Do not label it progress or failure. Simply ask yourself this: am I willing to let God be my stability? Not my ideas about God, not my understanding of truth, but God itself. For when stability rests in God, it cannot be shaken. Appearances may change, emotions may fluctuate, circumstances may rise and fall, but the soul that rests in God stands firm. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. This is the sanity of awakening. Not excitement, not certainty, not control, but peace, quiet, deep, and unmoved. There is a requirement in spiritual living that has been almost entirely forgotten in our day, and because it has been forgotten, much that passes for awakening bears little fruit. That requirement is secrecy. Not secrecy born of fear or shame, but secrecy born of reverence. Truth is sacred, and whatever is sacred must be protected while it is still unfolding. Jesus was very clear on this point. Again and again, after a healing or a revelation, he would say, "Tell no man," not because truth needed concealment, but because premature exposure weakens realization. The human mind loves to talk about what it has not yet embodied. And the moment truth is discussed before it is lived, it becomes theory. Spiritual realization is like a seed planted in consciousness. While it is still tender, while it is still drawing nourishment from the depths, it must not be exposed to the air of opinion, explanation, or approval. Cast not your pearls before swine. The Master said, not as a judgment against others, but as a protection of the sacred. A pearl forms in silence, under pressure, hidden from view. In earlier generations, students of the infinite way understood this instinctively. They did not rush to speak of their inner experiences. They did not announce insights. They did not teach until truth had lived them. Today, however, we live in an atmosphere that rewards exposure. The moment something is glimpsed, it is shared. The moment something is felt, it is broadcast. And this habit has weakened spiritual depth. When truth is spoken too soon, it becomes mental. It shifts from revelation to opinion. And opinion, no matter how elevated, has no power. The letter killeth, but the spirit giveth life. The letter is what remains when spirit has been discussed instead of realized. Secrecy does not mean isolation. It does not mean withdrawal from life. It means inward guarding. It means allowing truth to take root so deeply that it no longer depends on words for its existence. When truth has become your consciousness, it will express itself naturally, without effort, without explanation, without the need to persuade. You will notice that those who speak most about awakening are often those who are least settled in it. This is not a criticism. It is an observation. Speech is often a substitute for stability. When one truly rests in God, there is little need to announce it. The presence speaks for itself. By their fruits ye shall know them, not by their vocabulary. Secrecy also protects us from spiritual pride. The moment we speak of our progress, we begin to measure it. We compare, we evaluate, we identify with it. And in that moment, the ego quietly re-enters through the back door wearing spiritual clothing. The teaching then becomes my realization. my awakening, my insight, and truth has been personalized. But truth is never personal. Truth is universal, and it can only be known when the personal sense yields, he must increase, but I must decrease. As long as we are eager to speak, eager to teach, eager to be seen as awakened, the I is still too active to allow Christ consciousness to reign. There is also a practical reason for secrecy. Truth unfolds in stages. What is revealed today may be incomplete tomorrow. What seems clear now may deepen later. If we speak too soon, we may find ourselves defending yesterday's revelation against today's deeper light. Silence allows truth to correct and complete itself within us. Many of the Master's teachings were given privately, not publicly. To the multitudes he spoke in parables. To the disciples he spoke plainly. And even then he said, I have many things to say unto you, but ye cannot bear them now. Truth is revealed according to readiness, not curiosity. This applies not only to others, but to ourselves. We must learn to bear truth inwardly before we express it outwardly. We must allow it to settle, to test us, to change us. Does it reduce our judgment? Does it increase our compassion? Does it quiet our reactions? If not, it is not yet ripe for expression. Secrecy creates depth. Depth creates authority. Authority creates peace. And peace is the unmistakable sign of spiritual realization. Not excitement, not certainty, peace. So if something sacred is stirring within you, guard it. Do not rush to name it. Do not hurry to share it. Sit with it. Live with it. Let it reveal what must be surrendered. Let it show you where you still cling to appearances. And when it is ready to express, it will do so without your help. Truth does not need promotion. Truth needs protection. And secrecy is the sanctuary in which it matures. There is nothing inherently evil in the tools of our age. Instruments have no power of their own. Power is always in consciousness. And yet, we must be honest enough to recognize that certain environments are not conducive to spiritual ripening, not because they are wrong, but because they are noisy. And among these environments, none is more opposed to inner maturation than the constant exposure and stimulation of what is called social media. Spiritual ripening requires inwardness. It requires privacy of thought, restraint of speech, and a willingness to let impressions settle without commentary. Social media, by its very nature, moves in the opposite direction. It invites reaction. It rewards immediacy. It thrives on visibility. And all of these are qualities of the outer man, not the inner life. Jesus said, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret. That instruction was not merely about prayer. It was about orientation. The kingdom unfolds in secrecy. It does not appear on display. It does not announce itself in public forums. It grows in stillness. The mind, however, loves engagement. It wants to respond, to agree, to disagree, to be seen, to be heard. And when spiritual ideas are brought into an arena designed for reaction, those ideas are quickly reduced to opinions. They are debated, defended, distorted, or dismissed. And in that process, their living essence is lost. We must understand this clearly. Truth cannot ripen in an atmosphere of constant commentary. Commentary keeps consciousness outward. It keeps attention divided. It prevents the settling that allows revelation to deepen. When we are continually exposed to others' interpretations, we lose contact with our own inner listening. This is why so many today feel spiritually informed, yet inwardly barren. They know much, but they have realized little. They have heard every teaching, yet they have not heard God. Why stand ye gazing up into heaven? The angel asked. In our day, we might say, why stand ye gazing into the screen? Social media trains the mind to live externally. It conditions us to seek validation, affirmation, or agreement. But spiritual realization requires the opposite posture, the willingness to stand alone with God, without witnesses, without applause, without reassurance. I and my Father are one. That realization does not require likes or confirmation. There is also a subtler danger. When spiritual ideas are consumed rapidly and continuously, they lose their power to penetrate consciousness. They become entertainment. They stimulate interest, but they do not transform character. And transformation is the only evidence of truth received. Joel often reminded students that truth must be lived, not discussed. Yet discussion is precisely what dominates modern spiritual spaces. One teaching contradicts another. One voice competes with the next, and the student, overwhelmed, tries to reconcile them all. But reconciliation is not required. Silence is required. This does not mean one must reject the world or withdraw permanently. It means one must learn discernment. Not everything that inspires is nourishing. Not everything that resonates is revealing. Many things feel true because they stimulate the mind. Few things are true because they quiet it. If you notice that after prolonged exposure to spiritual content, you feel restless, unsettled, or mentally crowded, this is not because truth is demanding more effort. It is because the soul is asking for space. Be still and know that I am God. Stillness is not a suggestion. It is a requirement. Truth does not need constant reinforcement. It needs protection. It needs periods of quiet where it can integrate into consciousness and begin to govern life. Without this integration, awakening remains superficial. It excites interest but does not establish dominion. We must remember that the Christ consciousness did not spread through visibility. It spread through embodiment. The Master did not post teachings daily. He lived them. And when he spoke, it was with authority, not the authority of popularity, but the authority of realization. Therefore, if you are serious about spiritual ripening, you must be willing to limit exposure. You must be willing to choose silence over stimulation, depth over breadth, and being over sharing. This is not withdrawal from love. It is devotion to truth. The fruit of the Spirit is not noise. It is peace. And peace cannot grow in constant motion. One of the most subtle errors to arise in modern spiritual thought is the belief that consciousness is something to be increased, expanded, or developed. People speak of becoming more conscious, raising consciousness, evolving awareness, as though consciousness were a personal possession that could grow or diminish. This belief, though widely accepted, rests upon a misunderstanding of what consciousness truly is. Consciousness is not an attainment. Consciousness is not a state achieved through effort. Consciousness is not personal. Consciousness is God, and God does not increase. God does not evolve. God does not improve. I am the Lord. I change not. If consciousness is God, then the idea of becoming more conscious is already false at its root. What, then, is actually happening when one seems to awaken? What is falling away is not unconsciousness, but the belief that we were separate from consciousness. The sense of limitation dissolves, the false center yields, and in that yielding, consciousness stands revealed as what has always been present. The human mind loves progress. It wants to move forward, to climb upward, to accumulate insight. But spiritual realization moves in the opposite direction. It is not an ascent, it is a descent into humility. It is not the adding of something new, it is the removal of something false. Except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. The belief that one can become more conscious keeps the seeker endlessly striving. There is always another level, another realization, another breakthrough, and yet peace remains elusive. Why? Because the seeker is still seeking as a person, but the person does not awaken. The person dissolves. When Moses stood before the burning bush and asked the name of God, the answer was not a concept or a title. It was, I am, not I will become, not I am becoming, but I am, pure being, undivided presence. That I am is not improved by our efforts, nor diminished by our failures. It simply is. Many today confuse heightened perception with consciousness. They notice more, they feel more, they sense subtleties. But awareness of phenomena is not awareness of God. One may be exquisitely sensitive and still be living entirely in the realm of appearances. Consciousness is not knowing more about the world. Consciousness is knowing God as all. The belief in becoming more conscious is another form of self-improvement, and self-improvement belongs to the human realm. Spirit is not improved. Spirit is revealed. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. Flesh may improve, spirit does not. This error also leads to judgment of oneself and of others. One believes oneself to be more conscious than before, or more conscious than another. But the moment comparison enters, truth has departed. Consciousness does not compare. Consciousness does not measure. Consciousness does not rank. It simply is. Joel reminded us again and again that the work is not to become something, but to be still enough to recognize what already is. The more we strive to awaken, the more we reinforce the sense of a separate self trying to reach God, and that very effort postpones realization. Awakening occurs in moments when we stop trying. It comes when the mind relaxes its grip, when the heart surrenders its demands, when the will ceases its striving. In that quiet, yielding, consciousness reveals itself not as something new, but as something familiar, something always present, something unmistakably simple. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Salvation is not achieved through movement. It is seen through stillness, and consciousness is not reached by effort. It is noticed when effort falls away. So let us relinquish the idea of becoming more conscious. Let us release the burden of progress. Let us cease measuring our spiritual life by experiences, insights, or sensations. And let us rest quietly, humbly, expectantly, in the awareness that consciousness is already complete. For when the false idea of becoming falls away, being remains. And in that being, there is peace. There comes a point in every sincere spiritual life when one discovers that silence is no longer a luxury, but a necessity. It is not merely that silence is peaceful. It is that without silence, the human mind loses its balance. The world grows louder, opinions multiply, information overwhelms, and the individual, unless anchored in inner stillness, begins to live from reaction rather than revelation. Silence, in the spiritual sense, is not the absence of sound, it is the absence of personal interference. It is the suspension of judgment, the cessation of mental activity, the willingness to let God be God. Be still and know that I am God. Notice that the knowing comes after the stillness, never before it. The human mind was never designed to carry the weight of existence. It was meant to be an instrument, not a ruler. When the mind attempts to govern life, it becomes anxious, fearful, overburdened. But when the mind is gently set aside in silence, it returns to its proper function, receiving, interpreting, obeying. In silence, sanity is restored because truth is allowed to speak. The madness of the world is not caused by evil events, but by the belief that the human mind must interpret and control them. Silence withdraws that false responsibility. In silence, we discover that life is governed not by human thought, but by divine intelligence. Many imagine that silence is passive, that nothing happens there, yet silence is the most active state of consciousness there is. It is in silence that guidance comes, healing takes place, and order is restored. Elijah did not find God in the wind, nor the earthquake, nor the fire, but in the still small voice. This still small voice cannot be heard while the mind is busy naming, labeling, fearing, or desiring. It speaks only when we are willing to listen without agenda. And listening without agenda is rare, because the human mind always wants something, an answer, a result, a reassurance. True silence asks for nothing. There is a reason Joel insisted that students not talk excessively about truth. Words stir thought. Thought invites argument. Argument reactivates the mind. Silence protects realization. What is realized in silence does not need to be defended, explained, or justified. It simply lives itself. In the absence of silence, even spiritual ideas become mental burdens. Scripture becomes doctrine. Truth becomes belief. God becomes concept. And then the mind begins to argue about God, defend God, explain God, never realizing that God is not found in any of these activities. Silence is not an escape from the world. It is a return to reality. The world appears chaotic only because it is viewed through the restless mind. In silence, we begin to see that beneath appearances, there is order, harmony, intelligence. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. This is why silence must be practiced daily, not as discipline, but as refuge. A few moments of true silence where thought is relinquished and awareness rests will do more to restore sanity than hours of analysis or effort. Silence resets the axis of life from human will to divine governance. In silence, we do not seek answers. We offer ourselves. We lay down the burden of understanding. We stop trying to manage life. And in that surrender, life reveals itself as already managed. The spiritually sane person is not one who knows more, but one who listens more. Not one who speaks truth, but one who is spoken through. Silence is the womb of wisdom, and without it, even the highest teachings remain theoretical. Let us then cherish silence, not as withdrawal, but as communion, not as emptiness, but as fullness, not as nothingness, but as God awareness. For in silence, consciousness remembers itself and the soul rests. One of the great causes of spiritual fatigue is the belief that the world must be fixed and that it is our responsibility to fix it. This belief, though often clothed in compassion and goodwill, places an unbearable burden upon the soul. For no individual was ever appointed savior of the world, and no human effort has ever corrected the nature of creation. The impulse to fix arises from judgment. We look out upon the world and decide what is wrong. We label conditions as evil, people as misguided, events as failures. And having made these judgments, we feel compelled to correct them. But the moment we judge by appearances, we have already stepped out of spiritual consciousness and into personal responsibility. Jesus never attempted to reform the world. He did not organize movements, legislate morality, or restructure society. He withdrew, he prayed, he bore witness. And from that state of inner alignment, healing occurred naturally. I can of mine own self do nothing. The exhaustion comes not from caring, but from trying. Trying implies separation. I over here, the problem over there. It assumes that good is absent and must be brought in. But spiritual understanding reveals that good is never absent. It is only unseen. When we attempt to fix the world, we reinforce the illusion that the world is broken. And what consciousness accepts as real, it perpetuates. The effort to fix keeps attention on the error, not on the truth. This is why well-intentioned people often feel drained, discouraged, and disillusioned. They are pouring energy into appearances. Joel taught that our function is not to change appearances, but to withdraw power from them. The moment we stop believing that conditions have power, they begin to lose their hold. The moment we stop fearing evil, evil collapses not because it is fought, but because it is seen as unreal. This does not mean indifference. It means discernment. It means caring without burden, loving without interference, serving without ego. It means recognizing that the world is not upheld by human effort, but by divine law. The government shall be upon his shoulder. Trying to fix the world also fosters spiritual pride. One begins to feel indispensable, needed, important. But the truth is humbling. God has never needed our help. God has never waited for human intervention. God is already governing, sustaining, redeeming. When we accept this, a great weight lifts. We are no longer rescuers. We are witnesses. We are no longer reformers. We are beholders. We do not push truth into the world. We allow truth to reveal itself. This shift restores vitality. Energy returns. Joy reappears. Why? Because the soul is no longer laboring under false responsibility. It is resting in divine sufficiency. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. The world does not need fixing. It needs seeing. Seeing with spiritual vision. Seeing beyond appearances. Seeing God where the senses report chaos. And this seeing does more to heal the world than all the effort of human will combined. So let us cease trying to fix the world. Let us instead fix our attention on God. Let us withdraw judgment, relinquish control, and release responsibility. In that release, the soul is refreshed, and the world, though unchanged in appearance, begins to transform in our experience. There is perhaps no greater release in the spiritual life than the moment one no longer feels the need to control outcomes. Until that moment, life is lived in tension, hoping, fearing, planning, correcting, anticipating. The mind is always leaning forward, asking, what will happen? And how can I make it turn out right? But spiritual consciousness rests because it knows that outcomes are not determined by human effort. The desire to control outcomes is rooted in the belief that good is uncertain. If we truly believe that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, we would never fear the future. Control is merely fear in action. It is the mind's attempt to secure itself against imagined loss. Jesus never controlled outcomes. He did not try to ensure success. He did not protect himself from failure. He did not manage results. He simply did the will of the Father and left the consequences to God. Not my will, but thine be done. That statement alone dissolves the entire burden of control. When we attempt to control outcomes, we assume that we know what is best. We decide how healing should occur, when supply should appear, what form harmony should take. But the human mind cannot see beyond appearances. It does not know the end from the beginning. My thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. True spiritual living begins when we are willing to let go even of good outcomes. As long as we insist that something must turn out a certain way, we are still living under human law. Grace operates only where surrender is present. This does not mean passivity. It means obedience without anxiety. We take the step that is given, speak the word that is placed upon our lips, move when moved, and stop when stopped. We do not rush ahead of guidance, nor do we lag behind it. We live in responsiveness, not control. Joel often reminded students that demonstrations do not come from effort, but from alignment. When consciousness is aligned with God, outcomes take care of themselves. Healing occurs. Supply appears. Relationships reorder, not because we manage them, but because we ceased interfering. The need to control is especially strong in spiritual work. One may try to control the healing of another, the progress of a student, the unfoldment of a situation, but no one has ever been healed by another's will. Healing comes when the false sense of responsibility is relinquished and divine intelligence is allowed to operate freely. When we let go of outcomes, peace enters immediately. Even before anything changes outwardly, something changes inwardly. The heart rests, the mind quiets, the soul breathes again. And often it is precisely then that the outward change occurs effortlessly, unexpectedly, naturally. Control binds us to time. Surrender releases us into eternity. Control says, this must happen now. Surrender says, God's timing is always now. Control worries about tomorrow. Surrender lives in the eternal present. To live without the need to control outcomes is not to be careless, it is to be confident. Confident not in ourselves, but in God. It is to trust that life is governed by wisdom far beyond our own. It is to accept that nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. And so we learn slowly and gently to place every concern, every hope, every fear into the hands of God, not as a gesture, but as a way of life. We stop rehearsing the future. We stop revising the past. We abide Commit thy way unto the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. That is not poetry. That is law. There is a power available to every individual that is so gentle, so unobtrusive, that it is almost always overlooked. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It does not operate through force or persuasion. And because it does not conform to human ideas of power, it remains unused by the majority of the world. This power is spiritual recognition, the silent acknowledgement of God as the only cause, the only presence, the only power. Most people seek power through action, through words, through influence, through effort. They believe that power must be applied, exercised, directed. But spiritual power operates without strain. It does not push. It reveals. It does not attack error. It dissolves it. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. The quiet power is activated the moment we withdraw belief from appearances, when we no longer react to what we see, hear, or feel. When we refuse to assign reality to conditions, consciousness returns to its natural state, and in that state, truth acts. This power does not come through affirmations or declarations. It does not depend on mental strength or emotional conviction. It arises when the mind is silent enough to let God be present as God. It is the power Jesus used when he said nothing before Pilate. It is the power that healed without words, fed multitudes without effort, and calmed storms without resistance. Few use this power because it requires humility. It requires that we stop trying to do something spiritually impressive. It requires that we accept our own nothingness. I can of mine own self do nothing. To the human ego, this feels like weakness. In truth, it is liberation. The quiet power works invisibly. No one sees it operating. There is no sensation to prove it is happening. And yet, when it is present, results follow naturally. Healing occurs. Conflicts dissolve. Fear fades. Not because something was done, but because something false was released. This power cannot be used for personal gain. The moment we attempt to use it, it withdraws. It functions only when the personal self steps aside. That is why it cannot be taught as a technique. It can only be lived as a surrender. Joel spoke often of being a beholder. This is the essence of the quiet power. To behold is not to watch passively, but to recognize spiritually. It is to look upon the world and silently know God is here. Not someday, not eventually, here. When this recognition becomes habitual, life changes without effort. We are no longer tossed about by events. We are no longer disturbed by appearances. We move through the world quietly, gently, effectively, not because we are strong, but because we are aligned. This is the power that heals without diagnosis, supplies without planning, guides without explanation. It does not operate through thought. It operates through awareness, and awareness does not argue. The world will never value this power. It is too simple, too quiet, too humble. But those who discover it never abandon it because it restores something the world cannot give: peace. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Stayed, not active, not striving, not fixing. Stayed, and so the journey ends where it began, not in doing, but in being. not in control, but in trust, not in effort, but in grace. Consciousness is the only cause. God is the only power. And the quiet recognition of this truth is sufficient unto itself. Let us then go forth not to practice truth, but to live from it, not to use power, but to rest in it, not to change the world, but to see it as God sees it, and in that seeing, all is well.